Rockets and Knicks were in Game 5 when O.J. started that fateful drive. His four-way hazard lights were blinking, and no one knew what the Jews was thinking.
I've been to Reno, Chicago, Fargo, Minnesota, Buffalo, Toronto, Winslow, Sarasota, Wichita, Tulsa, Ottawa, Oklahoma, Tampa, Panama, Mattawa, La Paloma, Bangor, Baltimore, Salvador, Amarillo, Tocopilla, Barranquilla, and Padilla. I'm a killer. I've been everywhere, man. I've been everywhere, man. Crossed the desert bare, man. I breathe the mountain air, man. I've traveled, I've had my share, man. I've been everywhere.
This is Oversight Live, your advocate for good governance. We're putting the site back in. Oversight. Here's the watcher on the wall, your host, Ben Carpenter.
Good evening, Alaska. I am Ben Carpenter. This is Oversight Live. Welcome. We're going to have some fun tonight. Oversight Live, it's your road to Juneau until one can be built. I just love saying that. All right. It's probably zero chance that we'll ever see a road built, but you get the point. It's expensive to get down to Juneau to figure out what's going on and provide influence in our legislature. You can only get there by road or by plane or by boat. There's no road. So we've got recordings. We've got live broadcasts at committee meetings, and that's the best that we can do if you're not going to pay the money to get down to Juneau. And you can go to KTOO, Gavel, Alaska, and you can watch the broadcasts, but you can't ask questions. You don't know what's going on. You don't know what's going on. Well, if you tune in here, we'll rebroadcast the important things, and you'll be able to ask me questions. You'll be able to discuss things with people who are watching and learn about what's actually happening down there. I spent 6 years in the legislature, and I'm going to use my experience to help you understand what's happening so that we all collectively can provide better oversight of what our government is doing when we're not watching. In many cases, they're doing it to us, not for us. This conversation with a gas line, natural gas line, is one of those instances where you kind of feel after you've watched it like, man, they are really doing this to us, not for us. Anyway, if you've got questions, chat them up. We got the windows, the chat windows in Facebook, X, and YouTube. We're broadcasting on all of those. If you just chat in the chat box, I'm going to get that message, and I'll do my best to respond and answer your question live as we go. And if you're catching the recording and you've got a question or you want to provide feedback or comment or whatever, you can send an email to producer@oversightlive.com, and I will do my best to respond to you. And if you got a question, answer it. If you got a really good question, I may bring it up back on the air here. And don't be afraid to ask me the question by email. If you've got a good question, somebody else has got the same question. We just need to be brave to ask the questions and learn, right? There's nothing wrong with learning. And you can't learn if you did not know something, right? If you knew everything, then you wouldn't need to learn. So important that we ask good questions and get the information that we need so that we can provide good oversight. All right, so we're going to try to have fun tonight. Frank, if you got to ask the question, what is a good question, then I don't know, man. A good question. Something that keeps you up at night, that's a good question. Something that you just always wanted to know, that's a good question. The only bad question is one that doesn't get asked, right? I mean, even if it's a silly question or it's repetitive question, somebody can learn something from that. The bad question is one that doesn't get answered and you remain ignorant. That's a bad question. Okay. Yeah, so tonight we're gonna dive into the conference committee. They finally they finally met and had their first conference committee. I think, though, first off, we need to have just a brief conversation about what a conference committee is, because it's a little different than what you're used to if you've been watching the show or watching what's going on in the legislature. Okay, so conference committees they're their own animal. They only exist when the two houses, the Senate and the House, pass similar bills and they can't find agreement. The bill got passed by both bodies, but they won't. Both of them amended it, and they can't agree on the amendments. Okay, so I'm going to show you a document here that I put together just so that we can kind of level the field here, level the bubble. So conference committees, and this is just some real basic, high level oversimplification of the process. Okay, so when your two bodies, House and Senate, pass different versions of the same bill, they've got to figure out some way to find the agreement and pass a single bill. Okay, and this is the process. So the presiding officers appoint in Alaska. They appoint 3 members from each body to sit on this conference committee, and the conference committee only exists for the time necessary to find a solution to the bill, and then it no longer exists. Okay, so the process, and this is the oversimplification process, is the conference committee is meeting on House Bill 381. So that's a bill that originated in the House. The House passes it to the Senate. The Senate amends it and sends it back to the House. The House then has to choose whether or not to accept the amendments from the Senate. If they choose not to accept them, then they vote on that, simple majority. They vote not to accept the amendments. Then the bill goes back to the Senate, where the Senate is asked to recede, meaning step back or don't accept your amendments, recede from your amendments. If the Senate says, no, we're not going to recede, then you've got an impasse. And that's when the conference committee is appointed. So this conference committee is going to have 6 members, 2 members from each of the majorities in each of the House, and 1 member from the minority in each of the House. Okay. So the conference committee is not to be confused with a free conference committee. You have 2 separate committees. There are a possibility of 2 separate committees. One of them is a conference committee, and that's what has been established. The other one is a free conference committee, and that only gets established if we meet certain conditions, okay? And that it's important that we understand this. So a conference committee can request limited powers of free conference. It's not a free conference committee, but it's requesting limited powers of free conference. And the reason it would do that is because the members of the committee cannot find agreement on which bill, the Senate version or the House version, that they would agree to. Okay, so that's the first part of the conference committee. They take a vote. We're going to see this tonight in practice. Okay, they take a vote on whether they're going to accept the House version or the Senate version. They can't figure that out, or they don't have an agreement. And so then they request limited powers of free conference in their conference committee. And what this allows them to do is identify those things that they agree with, and they set those aside as being agreed to. And then they identify the things they don't agree with, and that's what they get to have limited powers of free conference for. Now, all they can do is take the Senate's version or the House's version of the thing that they disagree with. So they can go through their deliberation and they're discussing and they talk and they try to debate each other and find the agreement, right? They compromise. We'll take one of the things we disagree with will be the House. The other one will be the Senate. Okay. But this is the rule in the uniform rules. This is the rule with the conference committee. This is the check and the balance, right? So you can find compromise, but with limited powers of free conference, all you can do is select the House version of what you disagree with or the Senate version of what you disagree with. That's all you can do. Now, if you can't find agreement doing that, then you have to go back to the body and request free conference committee. The conference committee would cease. They would start another conference committee that's called a free conference. That's the subsequent committee that happens when the conference committee cannot find agreement. And the members that are sitting on the conference committee, by our rules, by the Alaska uniform rules, are no longer eligible to serve on the free conference committee. Okay? This is a major distinction that we have to keep in mind, because there is a chance that this committee, this conference committee, is going to try to offer amendments. They're going to try to change some of the language in the parts of the bill that they disagree with in order to find agreement. Okay? So I'll use an example. In the conference committee with limited powers of free conference on a bill, a hypothetical bill, the House says the color is orange. The Senate says the color is purple. Okay? I'm using some really basic agreements here. They can't agree on orange. They can't agree on purple. So what they would want to do is say, okay, well, we'll change the color from purple to black. Okay? We don't want orange. We don't want purple. So let's change it to black. Okay? So that would be amending the language in the bill. That is not allowed under limited powers of free conference. All you can do is select the House version of the Senate bill. This is the check and the balance to make sure that the 6 people sitting at that table don't wield unlimited power. This is the reason that they have a conference committee with limited powers of free conference. There are 60 members of the legislature who have already done their due diligence, right, on this bill. And now it's down to find some sort of compromise with 6 people. And really, it's not 6. The 2 minority members really don't, for all intents and purposes, don't really matter. You got 4 members of both majorities, and they're the ones that are calling the shots. Okay. So in the strange world that might exist where, one of the majority members doesn't agree, maybe the minority member has some weight here, but usually that is not the case. Okay. So here's what happens. If they come down to the point where they think that they have to amend the bill, they're going to have to institute a free conference committee. And that means the people who are sitting at that committee get the boot, and the presiding officers have to appoint 6 new members. Okay? So this is an incentive for them to find, right? If you're on the conference committee, and as we'll see, the House members that are sitting on this committee are Representative Edgman. Speaker Edgman placed himself there. Representative Schrage, who is the co-chair of finance, and then Representative Ruffridge, who's the minority member. And on the Senate side, you've got Senator Stedman, co-chair of finance. You've got Senator Hoffman, co-chair of finance, and the minority member is Senator Kronk, who sits on the Senate Finance Committee. Okay, so these are the guys who are calling the shots. Okay, they're the senior leaders within the organization. There is no way that they want to get the boot from this committee. They want to control what's happening. So they do not want to go to a free conference committee because they would no longer be eligible to sit in those seats. They would have to vacate and 6 other people would come in. So if the bill needs to be amended, it has to be amended by 6 new people. So we're gonna here's the couple sticking points on this bill is probably going to boil down to a couple things. Probably a Hill Corp tax. Probably what's the rate of the tax? Maybe what is the PLAs that what do we call those? The project labor agreements. What do those say? Okay, so if it boils down to these sticking points, right? If that's the crux of the problem, they can only choose yes or no on a S corp tax. They can't change the rate because that would require an amendment. They can only choose yes or no. Do we have it or do we don't have it? The Senate added it, the House did not. So we either accept it or we reject it. Okay. You can't amend it and say it's going to be a higher or a lower rate. Same thing with the VAT or the AVT. If you want to amend the rate of the AVT, unless it's different in both bills, you can't amend it. You would have to go to free conference to amend it. Your project labor agreements, if you want to amend what the requirements are, you got to go to a free conference. But I suspect these guys are going to try to find a way where they're going to be allowed to amend the bill in conference committee. Okay. That's what I suspect they're going to try to do. And the technical way on which they would do that would be able to go back to the body. So this would be the next opportunity would be when both the House and the Senate have a floor session. And they would come back and they would attempt to waive uniform rules. And it would be Rule 42, 42A or B, or both. Okay. Rule 42. If they're trying to waive Rule 42, that's telling you that these individuals on this committee are trying to consolidate the power and allow themselves to amend. They can't find an agreement on both versions of the bill, so they want the power. Those leaders want the power. They don't want to allow somebody else to actually do the amending. Okay? So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. Your conference committee is not normally for public hearings. It's normally, the purpose of it is to find some sort of negotiation and agreement, right? That's its purpose. Another thing, you're not going to get 5 days notice. For all of your other committees during a regular session, you have a 5-day public notice requirement. It doesn't apply to conference committees. So that's why we never saw a notice for a meeting, is because they're not required to do it. I kept checking to see if they were going to notify, but they're not required to. They will say on the record, they will say, well, we'll try to give you as much notice as possible. Yeah. There's no opportunity for public testimony either. Okay. At the end of the day, what you're watching during a conference committee as opposed to a free conference committee is just a yes or no, up or down on the provisions of each one of the bills to find agreement. If you want to go to amendment, you got to go to a free conference committee. These guys do not want to lose their seat at the table. That is the incentive for them to find some agreement amongst the two of these, the two options. Okay. Before the bill goes to the governor, this is kind of the last step. I would argue, though, that because the governor has put 2 new bills on the call for this third special session, they don't have to find agreement on HB 381. Excuse me. They could just stop work on 381 and go back to the finance committee and work on another bill. Okay. So this isn't the last. You should not take the conference committee to be the last thing that's going to be done with regard to the gas line tax bill. Okay. It isn't this or nothing. There are other bills that could be in play. They're not going to be in play in the conference committee unless the conference committee goes to free conference, and then they can amend however they want. But it ain't these guys. These guys, unless the legislature with a 2/3 majority votes to what's the word I'm looking for? Bypass the rules. There's a technical word there. I'm losing it. If 2/3 of the majority waive the rule, if 2/3 of the majority waive the rule in each body, then this group of people would be able to go to free conference. Probably. They'll probably get a lawyer's opinion and say, yeah, that's possible. As long as the body waives the rule, then you can do it. It's just a way for them to consolidate power so they get their way. And you're watching the meetings, and you're like, you guys don't really want the pipeline. So what is it that you're going to do? Anyway, okay, so that is a overview, a very simplistic overview of the process. Let me check in with you and see if there are questions before we move on. Okay. Oh, philanthropist Frank, you figured out awaiting transmit to governor. Yes, your HB 93 or SB 93, whichever one it was, has changed status and is waiting transmittal to the governor. So they probably listened to the show and figured out that if they don't get it transmitted to the governor now, if he overrides it, they won't have an opportunity to override the, or if he vetoes it, they won't have an opportunity to override the veto, and they better get it submitted to him during a special session. Yeah, I don't think those people are listening to this show. Anyway. Christopher's like, I just want the baby. I don't want the birth pains. Just give me the baby. I want to know when the LNG project is going to begin. Yeah, don't we all? This is the messy process of self-government. Dixie's asking a question. Will the AGDC office insight as a consultant be honored, respected after it was known that they were not favoring Alaska? Dixie, I do not know what you're talking about. Who's not favoring Alaska? Good question. I answered this question earlier. The members for the conference committee are selected by the presiding officer. So the Speaker of the House and the Senate President appoint the members to the committee. And if it has to move to a free conference committee, then the presiding officers appoint new members to the committee. So with regard to Representative Edgman serving on the committee, he is the Speaker. He is the presiding officer of the House. He appointed himself to the committee. There's nothing saying he can't do that. But if they need to move to a free conference committee, he can't serve. He's going to have to appoint somebody in his place, which, boy, that's a slap in the face. Okay. Yes, we are now at 1 week of the special session, and we're moving on with the conference committee. These conference committees technically, well, in my experience, they usually move really quick. But normally, conference committees are usually only on the budget bill. I mean, it is possible that you could have a conference committee on a non-budget, non-appropriations bill. I mean, like this is not an appropriations bill, and you can have a conference committee, but you don't normally have it. It's normally, business as usual is a budget bill. Well, at this point, I don't know whether they're gaming the system. If the House and Senate come back in on the floor and they try to waive Rule 42, then they will absolutely be gaming the system. Is giving the notice gaming the system? Giving notice for the committee meeting? I mean, not particularly. I guess there's a perception more than anything that the public is expecting maximum notice for when a public conversation is going to happen, right? We get accustomed to the rules that say, hey, 5-day notice. But the rules also say that when you go to a conference committee, that 5-day notice is thrown out the window. It isn't required. So if the notice is less than 5 days, that doesn't, in my mind, indicate that they're gaming the system. They're allowed to do that. Yes, only gas line bills are at play, and not any gas line bill. It is 381, which they've brought forward from the previous legislature, special session, and the bills that the governor has put on the call. Chris, I'm not sure that is the case, but it could be, that since there are other bills sitting on the governor's desk. I mean, the governor has already indicated that he's willing to veto bills and he doesn't see those bills as having anything to do or germane to the conversation with the gas line bill. So I don't know that there's a lot of leverage there anymore. So there's a conversation going on here. Dean says to John, if they don't build as a result of the legislature obstruction, I would say they get their money back. If they drop the ball, then no, they don't get their money. Well, interestingly enough, we're going to hear about that. One of the first things that is going to be discussed after the formality, the formal votes, is AGDC and Glenfarne will be up, and this is going to be a topic, Dean, that you'll want to hear. There is a provision in you might have heard that there's a secret document that was leaked or stolen or whatever. That is germane to this conversation. So we'll hold that and you'll learn about it here in a little bit. There are bills on the governor's desk now, unless he's vetoed them within the last 24, 48 hours, the last time I looked. Craig, I do not know if there's been any announcement. I did not review the ethics committee meeting, and I haven't talked to anybody specifically about it. I haven't heard word that there's anything come out of it yet. I know they've got multiple meetings scheduled, so I doubt that they finished their business today, but they could have. Okay. All right. That's the conference committee. If you got other questions about it as we, if there are other questions as we go, then go ahead and pop them up in the chat, and I'll try to answer questions about it. So let's jump over to the conference committee and listen to the few minutes of the formalities here so you can see and hear what's happening. Here we go.
I call this meeting of the Conference Committee for House Bill 381 to order. The time is 2:02 p.m. on Friday, June 26, 2026. Members present today, we have in the Senate, Chair Hoffman, Senator Stedman, Senator Kronk. In the House, Representative Edgman, Representative Ruffridge, and myself, Chair Schrage. According to Mason's Manual, Section 770, Paragraph 3, the chair of the Conference Committee is from the body of the bill origination. I look forward to working closely with you all. As chair of the Conference Committee, I would like to review the process we will follow for these meetings. Both the House and Senate bill processes allowed for public testimony. That portion of the process is now concluded. The Conference Committee will only accept invited testimony. Unless invited by the chair, only members of the Conference Committee may take part in discussion or sit at the table. The Conference Committee will operate under Uniform Rule 42. Adopting any motion or taking any action requires a majority vote from each body. Per Uniform Rule 23G, the committee is not subject to the standard notice requirements of standing committees. We will do our best to provide reasonable notice prior to meetings for the public. Today, we will vote on whether to adopt either the House version or the Senate version of HB 381. With that, do I have a motion from the House?
I move, Mr. Chairman, that we adopt the committee substitute for House Bill 381, Finance amended. For reference, it is 34-GH2038/W.A.
And I'll object.
So all this is a formality, right? They already know how they're voting.
With that, I'd like to call the roll.
Senator Kronk.
No.
Senator Stedman.
No.
Senator Hoffman.
No.
Representative Ruffridge.
Yes.
Representative Edgman.
No.
Chair Schrage.
No.
Okay, so the House members were split. Representative Ruffridge said, yeah, let's adopt the House version. Schrage and Edgman both said, no, let's not adopt the House version. Okay, so for some reason, they don't like the House version.
For the Senate, 0 yay, 3 nay. And for the House, 1 yay, 2 nay.
All right. With that, do we have a motion to adopt the Senate version? Senator Hoffman.
Mr. Chairman, I move we adopt the Senate
committee substitute for House Bill 381 Finance Amended. For reference, it is 34-GH2038/SA.
And I'll object. And if we could please call the roll.
Senator Stedman,
Yes.
Senator Kronk,
Yes.
Senator Hoffman,
Yes.
Representative Edgman,
No.
Representative Ruffridge,
No.
Chair Schragi.
No.
For the Senate, 3 yea, 0 nay. For the House,
Okay, so now we've had 2 votes. The first one got only 1 vote in favor of adopting the House version. That was Representative Ruffridge. And all 3 of the senators voted to adopt the Senate version. But you have to have a majority of both bodies or both houses, right? So both of them fail. They will not adopt either version. And so the conference committee now continues on to the next stage, which is the requesting limited powers of free conference.
House, 0 yea, 3 nay.
And with 3 yeas, 0 nays in the Senate, and 3 nays in the House, House Bill 381, Senate amended, fails to be adopted. Having not adopted either the House or Senate versions of HB 381, and after consultation with the presiding officers, the committee will proceed with its work under the expectation that limited powers of free conference will formally be granted later in the process when the bodies reconvene and before the adoption of the final committee reports by both bodies. Under limited powers of free conference, the conference committee can adopt any language, dates, or effective dates subject to conference. I have distributed 2 copies.
Okay, so you can accept things that are subject to conference. So this is the key distinction that we're going to need to keep in mind as we move forward. The only things that are subject to conference are the things that you disagree with. Those things, and they're going to have a sheet that's sitting before them that is, here's all the things that are the same in each bill, and here are all the things that are different in each bill, okay, each versions of the bill, okay? The only thing that they can address are the things that are different in the bill. The things that are the same, that they're not going to be able to address. The conferenceable items under a conference committee with limited powers of free conference are only those things that you disagree on.
Copies of a letter for this purpose dated June 26, 2026, addressed to the Speaker of the House and the Senate President. I would entertain a motion to request limited powers for specific disagreements within existing language and allowing for amendments. Senator Hoffman.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the committee request
And requesting amendments, okay? That is not right, okay? There is no power within our rules. There is no authority within our rules to allow these individuals to amend the bill, okay? This is exactly why, because those people are the ones that are controlling the show. They're the ones that are in charge, okay? If you allow them to amend the bill, the body just has an up or down vote on what they do. That's it. Okay. So it is putting a lot of power into 4 individuals. If you look at it from each body, it's only 2 individuals in that from the majority that are calling the shots. Okay. The check and balance is, if you're going to amend this, first of all, you're going to try to find compromise between the 2 bodies. And then if you're going to amend it, new people have to go. New people get appointed to the committee, okay? So that little statement that Chair Schragi read in, that is not in the rules. That is not in keeping with legislative practice, okay? And amendments, that is a no-go for a conference committee. Now, the way that they're going to get around this, as I said earlier, is they're going to request the body through a 2/3 vote to waive the rules. Then they can do the amendments. But that means they're entering in free conference with people who are sitting at this committee. So they're basically, you just throw the rules out. You're like, we need to find agreement, and we're the only ones that can do it. The rest of the body, nope, you're not going to get to do this. We're not going to follow the rules. We're going to control things the way we want to control them. And we're going to ask you to give us a 2/3 vote to allow us to do that. If 2/3 allow it, then 2/3 are saying, hey, those are the right guys. we waive the rules. We don't care about the rules. Let's let them amend it. That's what they'll be saying.
limited powers of free conference from the presiding officers on the language that is not identical in the House and Senate versions of House Bill 381.
Thank you. Seeing and hearing no objection, we will take a brief at ease to pass the letters around for committee member signatures. We're already.
That's it. Done. That's the formal portion of the conference committee with regard to requesting limited powers of free conference. What comes next is a conversation with Glenfarne, which is important here. Let me explain a question here for Craig. Craig asks, explain why Kronk would vote for the Senate bill. It's a very good question. This goes, and I haven't talked to Representative or Senator Kronk. I don't know what his thinking is, but I'm pretty sure that he was opposed to the Senate version. Okay. But here's what happens in the culture between the Senate and the House. It's a foregone conclusion that the senators are going to vote yes for their own bill and no on the House version, and a foregone conclusion that the House is going to do the exact opposite. Okay. Ruffridge voted yes on the House version. He was the minority member. He's voting his conscience. He's whatever. If one other person had voted yes from the House side and two senators had voted yes, then they would have been done. It was a done deal. Okay. So the Senate is saying, yes, we want our version. The House says, we want our version. And we don't have agreement. So we're going to go to conference committee. The whole point is going to conference committee. Limited powers of free conference. That's the whole point. So the culture within the Senate is not to resist the pro forma votes, not to buck the system with the status quo, the pro forma, the technical pieces. And that's what that vote was. It was just a technicality. It's a formal thing that has to happen to get to limited powers of free conference. Okay. The House, you'll see this in another place. Okay. When a bill is passed on the floor, they will ask for a vote that says accepting the effective date clause of the bill. Okay. Sometimes you will find members that are opposed to the bill in the House who oppose the effective date clause. And they may be doing it just to be obstinate. They may legitimately not want the effective date as written. Okay. In the Senate, you never see that happen. The Senate, all the senators, whether they agreed with the bill or not, whether they were on the winning or losing side, I guess you should say the losing side of the bill vote, they always support the effective date clause because it's pro forma. It's just a formality. Okay. That's what you see. It's a difference in culture between the two bodies. More than anything else, that's what explains it. And I think that's what explains this here is the senators come in, they're opposing the House. They all vote lockstep to take up their bill, knowing full well that the House is going to say no. And it's just perception. It's just the culture of the way they do things. That's the best answer that I can give you for that without talking to Kronk to know exactly why he voted yes. Okay, let's jump to the conversation with Glenfarne because it's instructive. Oh, let's speed this up just a hair. Maybe more than just a little hair. My fine motor controls here.
Back on the record at 2:09 p.m. Before we move on to today's presentation, I want to briefly outline the committee's process. Typically, a conference committee would begin by reviewing both the House and Senate versions of the bill. After discussions with committee members, there is interest in starting with the Senate Finance version, which largely mirrors and builds upon the bill passed by the House. From there, we will move on to amendments adopted on the Senate floor, which I expect will form the basis of most of our decision-making. While our initial focus will be on the Senate components, the committee retains the ability to consider the House version and its individual provisions as we work toward a final product. With that, we will now move on to a presentation from the Alaska Gasline Development Corporation, who will be providing an overview of House Bill 381 as was passed by the Senate Finance Committee on June 19th, as well as an updated model from the Department of Revenue. I would note that we have legislative finance and legislative legal available for questions throughout today's meeting. Our presenters for AGDC are Matt Kissinger, Commercial Director, AGDC President Frank Richards, Glen Farm President Adam Prestage. Please come up to the presenters' dais, put yourselves on the record. If you'd like to have the entire complement come to the table, you're welcome to.
Thank you, Chair Schrage. That would be great.
Very good. And when you're ready, again, please put yourself on the record and begin with your presentation.
So I'm Matt Kissinger. I'm the Commercial Director for AGDC via a consultation contract with Hawk.
For the record, Frank Richards, President of AGDC.
I'm Adam Prestage, President of Glen Farm, Alaska LNG LLC.
Good. Please continue.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Schrage and members of the committee. Before we begin with the sectional analysis, there's an issue that has come up over the last week. I think everyone knows what I'm talking about with respect to a stolen AGDC document, confidential document. And I thought it'd be worthwhile just to take a few minutes just to address it openly, let you ask any questions that you have on it, but also to clarify that we've been clear actually about these mechanisms on the record. So this document, and I've seen a copy, but I don't have a copy. I was not given a copy. But in looking through it, it outlined some of the mechanisms that we've testified about. In particular, it talked about a clawback mechanism and it being a paid clawback. And this is the difference between us getting to a point where we can't achieve FID and Glen Farm leaving the project, and the state having an option to push Glen Farm out if they don't meet certain milestones. This was an option, the latter, is where we can push them out. This is an option that AGDC wanted. This is a state option that we requested and negotiated for our benefit. And if I may, in April 23rd of last year, so 2025, this question was brought up in front of Legislative Budget and Audit. And so you had the following members present. You had Representative Fields, Representative Foster, Representative Josephson, Representative Kopp, Representative Tilton, Speaker Edgman, Senator Giesel, Senator Wielechowski, Senator Kawasaki, Senator Gray Jackson, and I believe that they also had President Stevens, Senator Myers, and Representative Hannon and Elam, Representatives Hannon and Elam in the audience. Representative Fields asked about these clawback mechanisms at that meeting. And what I said was, I said, and just to address this clearly, this is my words, and just to address this clearly, because I've heard many questions that dance around this, the clawback would be a paid clawback. And there's real important reason for that. If you're moving towards milestones and you're going to penalize your developer and they miss a milestone and you can just take everything away from them and they can lose everything, they will put nothing into it. And this is a $44 billion project that we're building. We need to put the very best work going into it. And that's why there were these paid clawbacks with respect to our ability to push the developer out. Again, that was not in the main agreement. And the main agreement has the abandonment provisions that we have also discussed where there is not a payment. And I'll just ask if my colleagues would like to add anything to that.
This is Adam Prestage from Glen Farm. To add to that, as I've said many times in this committee, in this forum and others similar, our effort here is to come to Alaska, build a pipeline and a historic transformational piece of infrastructure that has a tremendous, tremendous benefit to the state. We came here on the back and the legacy of a lot of attempts to deliver this project that weren't successful, and we are now in a position of having taken it further in its development than ever before. along the way, one of our core principles has to do things right by the state. And so to prioritize low-cost domestic gas as low as possible, to do the project as quickly as possible, and more above all, to make sure our contracts and our arrangements with the state are fair to all parties involved. There is no real path forward unless everyone feels like things are fair. One of those things that we think is fair is the state's clawback option. That's something that AGDC proposed to us in our negotiations. It's something that AGDC, in their capacity as representatives of the state, pushed for and advocated for. And it's something that we, Glenfarne, saw as a fair protection to the state, and we agreed to have it implemented as part of our contract. Again, this is a mechanism that is only exercisable at the state's option. In terms of Glenfarne's ability to seek recourse or any kind of compensation, we don't have that mechanism. We can't ask the state to exercise this option. If Glenfarne decides to abandon the project, we do so with no recourse. And that is a very important characterization of how this has been set up.
One thing, Chair Schrage, again, Frank Richards for the record, one thing that I would add to my colleagues is that it was important from AGDC's perspective to allow the opportunity for the state with a callback position, but it didn't obligate the state to pay it. It would be something that if it was exercised, we would come back to the legislature to ask if they wanted to go forward with the opportunity to pay this, or we have the opportunity then to be able to look to the open market to bring in another developer to be able to take on that expense and take on those responsibilities that Glenfarne is now doing.
Very good. Appreciate you addressing this issue.
So games within games, right? They're going to have another dialogue here because there's going to be some questions. We'll review those too, but in my mind, I'm asking the question, how in the world does a company that has been pretty tight-lipped about the things that they need to keep secret, like this has been been one of the undercurrents of friction between the legislature and Glenfarne this entire year, is the legislature saying, you're not giving us what we need. And Glenfarne's like, you know what? We'll give you everything you need, but we need to make sure that we maintain confidentiality. So Glenfarne's been the one that can hold OPSEC, operational security. And somehow there's a document that gets leaked. They say it's stolen. Okay. We'll find out it was just a draft. It wasn't, it was a previous draft. Okay. So the question in my mind is, why in the world is this topic out there in the public? Why has it been allowed? I'm saying allowed because I don't buy it that it was stolen or everything happens for a reason. Why would somebody want the legislature to know or the public to know that Glenfarne can get forced out, but you're going to have to pay him? Because that's the contract that they signed. Glenfarne can leave on their own volition, but they don't get paid. all their money that they put into this thus far is water under the bridge. They don't get it back. But if the state forces them out, if AGDC forces them out, maybe even if the legislature forces them out, the legislature is going to have to pay them per this contract. Perhaps there's some conversations going on behind the scenes, and this is something that I've been arguing, but I have said this months ago, that there are members of this legislature who do not like Glenfarne. They do not want a private company doing the pipeline. They want a state-run pipeline. They're socialists. You could call them communists. They're socialists. They don't want Glenfarne. So I suspect that there are some conversations going on behind the scenes, and it comes to a point where rubber meets the road right now. and everybody needs to be talking about the pertinent things. And here is something that is supposed to be secret, but it needs to be out there. If you kick Glenfarne to the curb, it's going to cost you. The state is going to have to pay for that. And I think that was strategic. I think that was probably deliberate on somebody's part to let the legislature know you can't force us out and not pay a cost. Now, is there ever going to be proof of that? No, probably not. Probably not. But there's probably more to this story, is what I suspect. I've not seen the document. I don't think somebody at the legislature, I think, has the document, but Glenfarne doesn't even, they'll say it again. They don't even have the document. So there's a conversation out here about a document, but that document is not, to the best of my knowledge, public. So the questions that are going to come up about what else is on the document, I mean, Senator Stedman's going to try to get that document out of the open. He's like, we need to know this information. Oh, really? We do? Yeah. Who is the one that's having the conversation about kicking Glenfarne to the curb? That's why you would preempt with this information that says, well, if you do that, you're going to have to cough up some dough. I don't know, to answer your question specifically, Craig, I don't know whether it specifies the amount. Maybe they talk about it here in a minute. I can't remember. I don't think they do. Again, they shouldn't be talking about it because it's one of those confidential documents. We can make an argument about whether it should or shouldn't be confidential. That's a different conversation. The reason, the strategy or the strategic nature behind this is, why would this information come out now? What would be the importance of it? And why is from this document, it probably says more than one thing. Why is this the only thing that became pertinent to the public conversation? Frank is asking a question. What happens if there's a federal takeover? What happens to Glenfarne? I don't know. I guess that, I mean, we're kind of, I don't know if it's uncharted waters, but it's a big unknown. What does it mean if the federal government comes in and takes the project over? Does it mean that Glenfarne continues to build? They just are, instead of building it for the state of Alaska, they're building it under the purview of the federal government? Or does it mean another contractor comes in? I doubt it's another contractor, because Glenfarne's, they've got it as, they've got the relationships, and they've got the project, right? It's in hand. So if the federal government comes in and says they don't trust Glenfarne, then maybe they've got a preferred contractor that they would just hand it to, and Glenfarne would be out. I don't know. If they're out, does this contract, does the court agree that they've been forced out and thus the state has to pay it, right? I mean, I don't know. There's lots of questions here. What on earth are you saying? Kicking them out falls under the Fifth Amendment. I want to see the document. Okay. I'm not sure how it falls under the Fifth Amendment, so you'll have to educate me. Ken, yeah, what else don't we know? That is a question that is being asked. What else don't we know? That is the question that has always been asked in the legislature. What don't we know? We want you to share with all your secret documents. Again, this is not a public project. This is a private project. It's owned by Glenfarne. We sold it to them. We sold it. We gave it away, right? It's not a public project. There aren't public dollars going in to fund the project anymore. It's all private. Entitlement, the legislature and entitled to information that they think they want is irrelevant. All they need to do is decide the tax structure. The project is not their purview. They are not the project managers. They lost that title. They lost that title a long time ago when they could not find a developer who wanted to build it as the state's contractor. Carrie, I understand what you're saying. If you're looking at this solely from a public arena, you say transparency, we should have 100% transparency on everything. Okay. That's a bad argument because logically it doesn't hold up. I'll give you a couple examples. Okay. Government deals with children, abuse situations, whatever. Many times the documents and the information in regards to child dealing with children are redacted and kept secret for the protection of the child. And we don't demand, hey, you know what? There can be no confidential information because we recognize that there's a need. Okay. Another avenue, another area where we recognize it is grand juries. We don't want the grand jury to be out there persecuting individuals and things unfoundedly. Okay. So there's a reason why the Constitution and the laws say that grand jury proceedings are secret until there's an indictment or a report released, because we don't want the weaponization of the information. Okay. So there are reasons why state government and in business, things remain confidential all the time. That is the nature of business. So for us to come into the public arena and say, well, somehow we're entitled to 100% transparency from Glenfarne. No, you're not. You're not entitled to change the tax statute. You don't have to do that. Glenfarne can say, tough luck, we're not going to build the project, and you can go find a different project developer. You're not entitled to private confidential information. The government is not entitled to it. Not unless the law says they have to give it up. They're not entitled to it. And they shouldn't be. You're never going to have investors and business partners having their confidential information out in the public arena. It just having that perspective shows the inexperience and the lack of information about how to conduct business in the private sector. Rick says, almost forgot after you took last night off. I did not know the state pays if they kick Glenfarne out. Yeah, I didn't know either. This is the whole point. And this is what Ken was saying. You know, what else don't we know? We didn't know about this agreement. We didn't know the specifics about this document. What Glenfarne just told us was last year they told us there's a clawback measure. Well, do we equate what Rick says? I did not know the state pays if they kick Glenfarne out. Do you equate kicking Glenfarne out to clawback? Like, what's the definition of clawback? Okay. And what we're learning now is what we learned a year ago. That's what they just put on the record. We've already had this conversation. We're not keeping secrets. This is already stuff that you guys should have known if you were paying attention. We said clawback. If Glenfarne gets booted, then the state's going to cough up money, right? If Glenfarne leaves, the state doesn't have to cough up money. That was already known. So it's not like this document was hiding something that wasn't already aware. So yeah, there's probably other things on that document that we may or may not know about. Do you want a pipeline bill? Every public testimony says the state is not on the hook financially. Do you need to see all of the documents? You need 100% transparency with Glenfarne to trust that there's nothing that's going to require the state to pay? I mean, if they're on the record, you just go back later when they come and say, "Oh, you owe us money." We're like, I don't think so. Look at how many meetings you told us that we don't owe you any money. Okay. Ken, I'm not sure we're talking the same thing here. You're saying many times in committee hearings, critical questions were answered with, we can't say, that's confidential. How can a decision be rendered? This wouldn't fly in any boardroom or courtroom in the country. Well, boardrooms and courtrooms are two totally different jurisdictions. You're absolutely right. Somebody saying, hey, that's confidential in a courtroom is probably going to buck up against a judge that says, no, I'm entitled to this. But the judge is going to be pointing to the statute and saying, you're required to give this information, or some sort of court rule that says I'm entitled to the information. I think you're completely wrong about boardrooms. Boardrooms in private enterprise are completely okay, and as a business practice, engage in confidential information. 100%. So those are not, those examples are not the same as what we're dealing with here. Again, this is a private company wanting to build a pipeline that the state of Alaska asked them to build, asked a private company to build. And then the legislature comes back and says, well, show us all your cards. Again, the major reason for why you do not make public some information is because it will increase the cost of the project. That's the result of everybody understanding all of the contracts, all of what some companies agreed to do something at a certain price. Another company's agreed to do something at another price. Is it fair that those prices are different? Yeah, it's completely fair. They've agreed to do it at that rate. If they didn't want to do it, it's not like Glenfarne's forcing them. But now you let public information come out, and now they can see what everybody else is being charged or what deal everybody else is getting. And now any opportunity they have to raise the price, that's what happens. That's the incentive. That's the reason why Glenfarne wants to keep things close to their chest with regard to managing the cost of a project. So the legislature demanding to see additional information, the byproduct of that is a more expensive project. Does the legislature care whether it's a more expensive project? Not if they don't want the pipeline. We got to understand what's happening in the private sector. Okay. Frank, I agree. I think it is plausible that if the federal government takes over, the state is no longer the taxing jurisdiction. They're not the taxing jurisdiction. The federal government would be. So the federal government could get the taxes. They wouldn't be, to the best of my knowledge, required to share it with the state of Alaska. Why would they? I don't know. Maybe there's a statute there that says they have to share with the state. I don't know. But I would agree that if the state loses jurisdiction because there's a national emergency or a national defense argument being made, then likely the state of Alaska loses jurisdiction, taxing jurisdiction as well. Yeah, this is the whole point. and thanks, Chris, for bringing this up. The state is out of money. The state is not going to pay. They're not going to pay to make this project happen. Okay. The only way that we have any remote possibility of making this project work is because there is a private company with private funding going to do it. And this legislature feels like we're entitled to be the controllers of this project. We're the managers. You need to come through us. No, you don't, because it's a private organization. It's not a government organization. All we're here for is asking you to make the project economical by reducing the tax burden. If you don't want to do that, then fine, don't do it. The consequence is you likely don't have a pipeline. We can play Russian roulette here, right? Spin the wheel. We'll call your bluff, Glenfarne. Not going to adjust the taxes. Private company. No, we're not going to do it. The state's demanding what we're demanding, and the consequences will own. Okay, Glenfarne moves out. Now you got to find somebody else to to build the pipeline. That's what happens. So how do you come in as a private company and maintain your control of the project, right? That's what the secrecy and the confidentiality agreements that you have with, how do you maintain control when you're staring down a legislature that feels entitled to the information that you know? They're not entitled to it. There's nothing in statute that says the legislature is entitled to the information that a private company has. Not entitled to it. It's a public project because most of the profit is U.S. debt, creating carbon grift. That is not even a logical sentence, Ken. It's a public project because the profit is U.S. debt, creating carbon grift. Sorry, brother. I don't understand your train of thought. Yeah, I think Rick's agreeing with me. Business does not work that way. Do you want total transparency if you seek or buy a business? What if you're buying a business? Of course you want transparency. We're not talking about buying businesses. This isn't a conversation about the legislature trying to buy Glenfarne. If you're trying to make a business deal and you're signing confidentiality agreements with other customers and with other vendors, you want to maintain those confidentiality agreements. Craig asks a good question. Can you get transcripts of the Senate majority meetings regarding the pipeline? You don't even need to FOIA that. And in the state of Alaska, it's not called a FOIA. FOIA is only for federal offices. In Alaska, if you want that type of information, it's a records request. Okay. But you don't need to go that route. Any of the public meetings that you have that are telegraphed, that are recorded, have a transcript for them. So you can get that easily. I can show you online here where you can find the transcript of the meeting, or you can take the audio, the file, and create your own transcript of it. AI will do that for you easily. Not a big deal. Anything that's in a recorded meeting like this as part of the record is available via transcript. That's easy. Now, if you're asking about what's happening behind the scenes and those conversations that are happening behind closed doors, there's absolutely no record of that. Those don't have records. Senate majority meetings that are not committee meetings. So you're talking about caucus meetings with individual legislators in their own office. That stuff is not, no, there's no record of that. Not unless the legislator keeps his own notes. Okay, Ken would do it different. He's got a different plan than what is currently in statute and what the project has projected. Ken says just take 20% at the wellhead like Western Australia for use and sale. So that's how Ken would do it. All I can say, Ken, is 21 and 11. 21, 11 and the governor's support. And then you've got it, right? I guess the question is $800 million a year in new revenue to state government not enough for you? We need more than that? $800 million a year plus an almost inexhaustible supply of gas for our lifetime. $800 million of revenue, and our allies have gas. $800 million more in revenue is not enough. We need more. Okay. I get it. If the project doesn't work with more, then you would have to find somebody else to build the pipeline and somebody else to buy the gas. This is the project that you have. $800 million is going to have to be enough, because if you want $1 billion or $2 billion, you want 2% of the project, it's not going to work. That's what they're telling you. You can call them liars and you can play Russian roulette with it. That's what we got. We got the law that's before us. If it's a private deal, they can just run on private land while getting private resources. Nope. It can still be a private project. It can still be a private developer and move on public land. It doesn't change the fact that it's still a private project because they're going across public land. That doesn't change anything in that regard. There are laws governing projects, private use of public land, right? It doesn't mean that if you're going to cross public land, you now become a public corporation and subject to state governance, like the legislature owns you. It doesn't mean that. Frank, good question. What's APOC all about? It has nothing to do with this project. APOC is about elections and disclosure of information with regard to legislators or candidates and office holders. Okay. Again, current incumbents, office holders, and candidates must disclose that which is required by law. You're not entitled to everything. 100% transparency is not what you get with me as a candidate. It's not what you get with me as an office holder. I am only required, and therefore I am only going to share information with you that is required by law, because I like my privacy. So I'm following the law. I'm giving you the information as a candidate, as an office holder, that I am required to by law. You don't get 100% transparency. Another example of where we don't require 100% transparency. Come on, guys. Okay. We got to get back to this meeting. We're on fire tonight, though. Okay, let's get some questions here.
On the front end, I know there's been a lot of media attention over it the last few days. One question that I would have, which has not been addressed as of yet, is who is able to claim value for any tax abatement that's provided by the legislature? I think that I've not heard that issue addressed yet and would appreciate hearing from you on that.
Representative Schrage, Chair Schrage, that's, I'll say, somewhat of a unique question and really was not contemplated in any sense prior to the question being raised over the last few days. It is beyond any practical sense that Glenfarne would be seeking this tax arrangement with any type of a view to evaluation in terms of if hypothetical after hypothetical occurred and the whole project fell apart. That hasn't even entered into our thinking. That said, understand the sensitivity around it. And we do have the view that if there were ever a cash consideration or a cash repurchase, we would not ask for the monetary value of any tax arrangement to be reflected in terms of in any repurchase.
So Glenn Farn's position is that you would not claim credit for any value added through tax abatement or other relief from the legislature.
Representative Sharkey, essentially, yes. We would not ask for any numerical value to be assigned based on the implementation of a tax arrangement.
Thank you. Senator Hoffman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Kissinger, you stated that the secret document, or however you want to call it, was stolen and not leaked. That is immaterial. The question that I have, and I guess the answer is, with that out there, both Glenn Farn and AGDC is willing to proceed, and we can still potentially have a project.
Yeah, Senator Hoffman, through the chair, it was a draft document done before we finalized agreements. It's noise to us, and absolutely feel like it should just be left that way.
Thank you.
Senator Stedman.
Well, noise it's not. One recommendation that you may want to consider due to the volume of individuals that have that document is to possibly redact some of the information in it and release it to the public. I don't see how you're going to pull it back. My understanding from reading some of the articles that one of the news media person got it from somebody outside the building unconnected to the legislature. So where that came from, I don't know, but it's circulated. So I think dealing with the clawback, I recognize the effort being put in by Glenn Farn and the potential value that we're talking about here in hundreds and hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars dealing with this project. It's significant. And that I'm sure we'll be looking as we go forward in this process to ensure that there's that it's clearly delineated that there could be no monetary value put on that concession, whatever concessions we make here with property tax. So it won't be left up to an arbitrator in arguments. It'll be, just as clear as we can make it. As far as it being a hypothetical potential of not going forward with a project, I don't believe it's that hypothetical because we've had numerous gas line projects that have not succeeded. This is just the latest one over the last 30 years. And there's a lot of FERC permits issued that never come to fruition. The projects aren't built. So it's a real instance that this project may not go forward.
I'll call you on that one, Senator Stedman. Do you know what's holding up the project right now? It's the legislature. There may be other things that prevent the project from happening. There could be. We could find things, we could learn about things in the near future that would prevent the project from happening. Assuming that the legislature adjusts the taxes to make it economical from what the project developer is saying, and the project goes forward based on that sticking point right now, there could be something else that requires the project developer to say, you know what, FID does not make sense and we're not going to do it. Do you know what the state loses at that point based on modifying the tax structure? Nothing. Zero. Zilch. Nada. They lose nothing. If Glenn Farn says no to final investment decision, then the $1 billion that the state has paid over the last decade to get it to this point, all of the permitting process, all of the money and effort that has gone into it, all that's either on hold or off the table, unless you find somebody else to take it and run with it, right? Matter of fact, it's probably dead. So to say that $800 million in new tax revenue from a volumetric tax is not enough, and to say this project is not going to go forward because there's lots of projects that have failed. There's lots of FERC permits that have been issued or obtained, and then the project never goes forward. Okay, to say all that doesn't matter because the project sitting before you's got all your permits. The project sitting before you's got a developer that says, "Hey, look, we're ready to go. We're making progress towards FID. We've even identified that we don't have all our sellers of gas or buyers of gas yet. We're still working that. Maybe it just so happens they're watching to see what happens here because they don't really believe that the state of Alaska is going to actually be able to build a pipeline, right? Maybe that's part of the problem of finding a buyer for gas. But the state of Alaska, all it has to say is, yeah, $800 million is enough if we get gas to South Central and interior Alaska. Whatever statute and agreement we can come to, $800 million is enough to see if the project's going to go forward. And if it doesn't, we don't get the $800 million. But you know what? You don't get 2% of a pipeline that doesn't get built either. 2% is the 20 mils. So current tax is more than $800 million. You don't get that if the project doesn't go forward. There's nothing here for the state to lose. All of the questions about whether this project is sound, whether the project is whether Glenfarne's doing it right, or all of the skepticism that exists here, it may or may not be unfounded. You may be right and it may come to pass. Glenfarne may have egg all over its face. Do you know who's not going to have egg on its face? The state government. Because all they're doing is saying we're going to modify our tax structure to make the project economical per what the developer says is necessary to make it economical. And if the developer files on its face, we've already put in statute that we're not holding the reins here. Like we don't pick up a financial liability for that failure. We lose nothing if Glenfarne fails. If we kick them out, we got to pay them. But if Glenfarne leaves because they decide not to, it doesn't cost us anything. So all of the skepticism and all of this is just, like Glenfarne says, noise. It is the legislature misunderstanding its role here. They're not the project developer. Ken asks the question: When did Glenfarne become the private entity of this project? When AGDC, which is a public-private corporation, AGDC is a state corporation. Public-private? No, it's not public-private. It is just a state corporation. The state corporation that was detailed, it was directed by the legislature to go figure out how to build a pipeline, likely gave away 75% ownership of this project to Glenfarne. I say likely because I don't know that they sold it. I think they gave it away. They said, we finally have somebody who's willing to take the project on. We can't find anybody to buy it. So we gave 75% ownership to the project to them. That's in a contract. It's inked. It's legal. It's binding. The private entity now owns 75% ownership of the project, which is majority ownership. The 25% owner is AGDC, and they have veto authority of some significant things. Okay. And several programs ago, we heard about that. But that's how Glenfarne is now in charge of the project and how the legislature is not. The legislature is not in charge of this project. The Glenfarne does not have to report to the legislature unless the statute requires it. Okay. Now, if the legislature wants to change the law, then they can do that. But under current law, the legislature does not own Glenfarne. The legislature is not entitled to information from a private company unless the law says that they have to give it up. All the legislature needs to do is decide what its policy is going to be with regard to taxation of this project. That is all the legislature needs to do. Period. All of this other nonsense is a distraction. It is misappropriation of your authority.
If that does happen, which I think none of us want to see, but if it does happen, how Glen Farm is separated out willingly, unwillingly, whatever happens, AGDC, that's a statutory issue we have to deal with. All is left up to the future, but clearly there's a reasonable chance that this project, as large and as challenging it is, will not go to fruition.
You see, this is the negative mindset, okay? Senator Stedman is of the opinion that there's every reason to believe this project's going to fail. Well, you can flip that coin over and say, well, there's every reason to believe thus far that the project can make it work. It's the age-old question of looking at the glass half empty or half full. Right now, Senator Stedman's the only thing that he needs to take action on is the bill before him, which is supposed to be a tax bill. What is your tax policy going to be for the state of Alaska? Are you going to modify it from your 20 mil tax to something that the project is asking for? Are you going to do that or not? That's it. Your personal opinion about whether the project is going to fail or not is irrelevant. It's irrelevant. Failure of the project costs the state nothing. From a purely legislative tax policy, revenue policy point of view, failure of the project costs the state nothing. Failure of the project means high cost gas, means, I'll back up, I'll eat my words. Failure of the project means we have imported LNG or continued South Central Cook Inlet gas. That's what it means. And those prices are only going to go up. That's what failure of the project means. No revenue, zero impact to the state. Status quo with our fuel. We're going to go out and import it, or we're going to continue to pay an increasing price for Cook Inlet gas. Again, Cook Inlet gas is there. It's just more expensive to go get. We can import LNG, but it's just going to be more expensive as time goes. That's the downside to this project failing. The decision makers here, the finance committee, there is no downside to a failed project. They don't have to cough up any money. They don't lose any taxes. So they were never going to get any anyway.
And when we look at the FERC timelines, the clock is ticking. And we recognize that. I think the deadline is May 21st of 3030, and then there's an export deadline in 32. So we'll be having those discussions here also, working with our deadlines with your FERC deadlines. So this is, I don't think it was overly hypothetical when some of us at the Senate Finance Committee brought up the potential. I think it's a real concern how if we end up crossing the bridge, how the dissolution happens is yet to be seen and worked out. But my recommendation that I'd like you guys to consider is some form of a public release of that document, just because it is so prolific. And people are going to...
So prolific. Have you seen the document? Senator Stedman would have you believe that it is so prolific that you just need to release it. I haven't seen it. To the best of my knowledge, it hasn't been published. What Glen Farm has said is it was just a draft. It's not even the final version. So why? Why does this matter? What does this have to do with tax policy? What does it have to do with tax policy? It doesn't. It has nothing to do with tax policy.
Be concerned about things that aren't in there, or there's these other controlling documents, contract, and it's a draft. So you got two issues there. They can draw erroneous conclusions from just reading that in isolation. And we've tried to
He's
ferret
reaching.
some of that out in our questions.
Very,
I think
very
feedback
calm
is
and
one
collected
of them.
and
There's mechanics.
reasonable tone of voice.
If you take a literal interpretation of that document, it may not be as accurate as looking at it in the entirety.
And 100% all this is we want to control. We want your information. We want to control this project. We want to control. We want more information. We want to know. We want to give our blessing. None of it matters. It's not your project. It is Glenfarne's project. Folks, you don't want this to be the Stedman pipeline. You don't want it. The legislature, this cannot be the Alaska legislature pipeline. They can't manage to pass legislation on time. They have to cram most of the legislation into the last 5 days of session, including the budget. They can't even manage their own business. What makes anybody think that more control by the legislature gives the project any greater opportunity of success? Follow the logic. If you just give us all of your information, just make it completely transparent, give us all of your information, and then we can help the project move forward. Really? If you've got control and you've got all of the information that you want, that'll help you make a decision as to what the right tax policy is? You need all of that information to decide what the right tax policy is? It's irrelevant to that conversation. This is not about the tax policy. It is about government control of something that is not in your purview. I honestly, I think this is a really good demonstration of how hostile our legislature is to private enterprise. It's not Glenfarne. Glenfarne's just the example. It is the nature of our decision makers in Juneau. Do not give a rip about private enterprise, about growth. It is not in their wheelhouse. It doesn't matter. What matters is legislative control. Private enterprise, you don't control that. You can tax it if you have the votes and you have the cojones to go back to your constituents and say, yeah, we're creating a tax. we're gonna tax that business, right? If you got the votes and you got the support publicly, go make it happen. That's how you get to control. You don't get to control what private enterprise does. That's exactly what Glenfarne is doing right now, is private enterprise. You don't get to control it. You think that it's in your purview because it's a AGDC, it's a gas project from a state corporation. You think, like, the perception is you've been around for a couple decades and you remember when you didn't have this and you spent money to get us this far, and you have this idea that this project that we had in the past where the state was running it, the state owned the pipeline. That's gone. You could not find anybody to develop the pipeline. You didn't have any takers. Your majors, right? Your BP, Exxon, ConocoPhillips, they all didn't want to play in that model of a state-run pipeline. They're like, peace out. No, we're not going to do that. What's the tax policy? That's the question before you.
Senator Stedman, through the chair, if you would be willing to provide us with a copy of that document, then we can consider redacting it and reviewing it. But as of now, we've only been able to look at that document. We don't have our own copy of that document. And I don't believe every member of the committee has a copy of that document.
And that was Mr. Kissinger for the record. Any follow-up, Senator Stedman?
No.
Okay.
Bingo. It's so widely spread. It's so widely out there, right? Listening to Senator Stedman. It's distributed so wide outside of this room because not everybody here has the copy of the document. Glenfarne says, I don't have a copy of the document. It's our document. It was stolen from us, but we don't even have a copy. Well, that's because I'm not going to release to you what it could be. You present the document to me and I'll tell you what needs to be redacted. Like, I'm not releasing confidential information, period. Unless you pass a law that requires me to release private information, I'm done with this conversation. You present the document to me. Okay, that's where we're at.
Speaker Edgman.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to maybe build a little bit on this line of questioning because to Senator Stedman's point about the amount of attention it attracts, both in sort of mainstream media, but as well as social media, it definitely, as best as I can observe, lent sort of an aura of scrutiny that maybe wasn't there before on this whole effort, or at least brought in a sort of a different audience, if you will. But my questions, I'll see if I can weave all this together in one overarching question, but is the draft document that got leaked or stolen or whatever it was, is that part of the eventual definitive agreement, number one? And it'd be interesting to know, again, to sort of contextualize this a little bit more, because there's a lot of people interested in what this may or may not have divulged. Is this the only provision of concern that you're aware of that came from this document? And then it also, perhaps to Glenfarne, would be interesting for the listening audience to know if, the competitive disadvantage that might have ensued from all of this, if that sort of has played itself out, or is that a real ongoing sort of concern?
Through the chair,
Okay, he's going to get his chance to answer that, but this is mission creep, right? The bill, as it says on the screen, is HB 381, oil and gas property tax, municipal tax. None of this is pertinent to the conversation in the bill and the purpose of this committee. None of it.
Speaker Edgman, again, Frank Richards for the record. The document that we are discussing today is a draft document that AGDC staff created specifically to provide information to AGDC's board while we were working on the definitive agreement. It contains a summary description of the documents that were negotiating with Glenfarne at the time, specifically naming them, but it also includes information around the selection of Glenfarne as the lead developer as compared to other parties. And so there is commercially sensitive information in there about other parties that we would find, again, would breach our confidentiality agreements with those other parties. So that is of concern to me that, and I tried to address this in the public media, is that we have put out a confidential document within the confines of the organization, AGDC, and our board of directors, and then it has miraculously arrived now into the halls of the Alaska State Legislature. That's unfortunate because it creates, again, this dialogue, but it provides potentially then commercially damaging information to other parties who aren't at the table today, who we have confidentiality with, but then also to Glenfarne now as the lead developer. And I'll allow Adam to describe the impacts to them.
Madam President, for the record, first, in response, Senator Hoffman, you asked about Glenfarne's willingness to continue to pursue the project, and we're absolutely willing to continue to pursue the project, and we will. It doesn't it creates a little bit of a hesitation around business principles and how we will be able to trust certain confidentiality protections. With respect to Speaker Edgman's question, in terms of how this impacts the project, what I can tell you is that throughout all of this process, particularly over the last 4 weeks of the special session, now going to the second special session, my team, myself, our CEO and founder, many other members of our team are getting daily calls from our counterparties who want to know what's happening in the legislature. You would be very surprised. Asian utility LNG buyers are actively tracking the committee process on a daily basis, calling us and saying, what's happening with this version, what's happening with that version. And it's not just LNG buyers, it's international construction contractors, it's investors, it's the US federal government are all watching to see what's happening here. And it presents a challenge. It's not an easy thing to explain that confidential preparation materials or briefing materials from a state agency were leaked and ended up in the media. So it's not something that outside parties would find as a positive for conducting business in the state of Alaska. However, it is where we are today. We still think the project is a good, strong project. And the reason that we're here, this tax arrangement for the pipeline, will facilitate significant advancement on the project and allow it to go forward. So,
are you calling him a liar? Are you prepared to say he is lying to you? If not, if your sense of the conversation is he's not lying, I'm not prepared to call him a liar, then there's some pretty damning information that he's presenting here, right? Harold, I might get to your comment because I think this is very instructional right at this point. I juxtapose it here on this screen. The picture of the man that's sitting in the chair is the president of the company who is responsible for building the pipeline, who hopefully knows everything that he needs to know about this pipeline project. Okay? Harold, your point is that Bert understands the factors the project must meet to move forward. Construction and completion. Do you know how many meetings Bert and Mr. Prestige have attended together in regards to moving the project forward? How many conversations with buyers of gas Senator Stedman has attended? How many meetings with the sellers of gas Senator Stedman has attended? How about the contractors that are necessary to provide pipe and ships and all of the equipment that is going to be necessary, equipment and supplies that are necessary to build the pipeline? Senator Stedman been privy to those conversations? Because there's only one person sitting at this table that's responsible for knowing all of that information. It's not Senator Stedman. Senator Stedman is a senator in the Alaska State Senate. He may have some experience in talking about projects as they pertain to the state, but he knows squat about what's happened within this pipeline, this pipeline project. He's not been privy to it. There's absolutely no way that Bert Stedman understands what exactly needs to happen with this project. Even if he did, it matters not. Again, Harold, let's just play for the sake of argument for a second that you're right and Senator Stedman's right. There's a whole lot of factors that Glenfarne is not going to be able to find a positive solution for. They're never going to reach FID. Why are we still having the conversation? Why haven't we gavelled out and gone home? Why are we wasting time? Why are we continuing this process, the charade? If that's it, if Senator Stedman knows best, and there's factors here that the project is never going to be able to get constructed, it's never going to be completed, why are we here? The easiest thing would be to say, you know what? Y'all are full of it. There's absolutely no way you're going to get this pipeline built with or without tax reform. I don't have the votes to do nothing, meaning if I gavel out, the governor's going to call us back. Okay? I don't have the votes to deal with that. I can pass the bill. I can get you tax reform. Doesn't matter because you're going to fail. I know best. And there's many of factors that are standing in the way, and you're never going to make it successful. So we're going to pass this tax bill. You're going to fall flat on your face, and I'll be able to say, see, I told you so. And where's the state in that? Where is the liability to the state? There's none. We're the only ones that pay the price with continued escalation of gas prices in Alaska and electric prices because no pipeline would get built. But no pipeline was ever going to get built anyway, right? Because Stedman knows best. It's not possible. We'll continue beating this up, beating Glenfarne up. We'll continue finding reasons to delay and obfuscate when all we could do is pass the bill, and then the other things, the other factors in the project are going to cause the project to fail. Why are we talking about the taxes then? Seems like that's the least of our concerns, right? Because there's other issues that you got no control of. Senator Stedman is not the project manager. He doesn't employ the project manager. He's not the boss of the project manager. No, nobody in the legislature is. If we go down this road here, this train of thought, if I've got Senator Stedman completely wrong, and what he really wants is for this project to succeed, this is a really crazy way to go about offering your solutions and your help to the project. Senator Stedman, if I take Harold at his word, he knows what's best. Glenfarne should be bending over backwards to hear from Stedman. Like, I'm going to spend as many hours as I can in Senator Stedman's office, and I'm going to learn from the man. What is it that Senator Stedman knows that I don't know? And I'm going to make sure that this project is successful. That's what Glenfarne ought to be thinking, right? Senator Stedman says he wants the pipeline, so he ought to be wanting to spend the time with him to share all of his wealth of knowledge so that they can overcome all of these factors, right? But instead, what we're doing is we're beating Glenfarne up in public over an inconsequential piece of information. I don't buy it, Harold. I don't think the motivation behind what's happening is wanting Glenfarne to succeed. I don't think that's the motivation. I think the exact opposite is the case. If we can get Glenfarne to walk away, if we can make it hard for them and make them walk away, we can wrestle control of the project back to the way we want to see it, because Glenfarne won't be around. We won't owe Glenfarne money because we didn't force him out. Glenfarne walked away. And then we can go back to thinking that the Alaska legislature is going to be able to manage a project and get a state pipeline, state-controlled pipeline. That's what I think the motivation is. So all of the poo-pooing that Glenfarne can't make the project work, Glenfarne's only been here for a year and a half. The state legislature has been working this project for over a decade. Some might argue more than a decade. Stedman says we've seen multiple versions of projects over the last 30 years. The legislature's been involved trying to get a pipeline for a decade or more, maybe up to 3 decades. Who's got the bigger track record of failure to build a pipeline? The legislature or this private company? So, Harold, forgive me. My skepticism is in the motivations behind the guy that you're putting your faith in, that he actually knows what's up. I don't think his motivation is to build the pipeline. That's what I think.
That's, I guess, the response to Senator Hoffman and Representative Edgman.
Senator Cronk.
Thank you, Chair Shruggy. Way before my time, I think this legislature created AGDC to work on the behalf of Alaskans to bring a natural gas pipeline. And I think we've spent nearly $1 billion doing that. I believe it's up to us to put the trust in AGDC to bring that project to fruition. And if we're going to second guess or sit here and second guess, I don't think there's going to be a project that's going to come forward. I think we put our trust in these people to bring this forward for Alaska. And I mean, that's just the bottom line. So I think we should, sit back and allow them to work the process. I mean, obviously, I don't think we want to be in the closet or in the darkness on anything that's out there, but this is what we've paid them to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Cronk. Senator Stedman.
Finally, a voice of reason at the table. It's exactly right. Senator Crunk's got it right. He hit the nail on the head. The man is privy to the conversations behind the scenes. He can read the motivations. That is exactly the problem. You do not have legislators who want to trust that Glen Farn and AGDC could be successful. They want to trust the exact opposite because their motivations are not for success for these individuals. They want something completely different, which is a state-run pipeline. That's it. They'll kick the can another year or decade to ensure that they maintain control.
Some of the earlier comments about the document and the sensitivity of it, I would agree that there's some information in there that's best left to be private. And Mr. Richards has expressed that several times here at the committee. I would recommend you redact that information out of them if you were to release it. It seems like the bulk of that document is not commercially sensitive from what I could see. I mean, there's a few things in there that's best left private.
So the larger question in my mind is, at this point, if Senator Stedman doesn't really want to see the pipeline move forward, why is it that he's pushing so hard to get this document redacted and released?
Very good. Representative Ruffridge.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Shruggy. A couple questions just based off of what Senator Cronk was asking. I think.
Great point, Ken. They are this is I'm taking some time to make sure that I don't offend, okay? Because I don't want to be that offensive. But Ken, this really is very small-minded. Think of all the great things that have happened in this, that the man has created. And you're making an argument that the Glen Farn would have had to build pipelines successfully for them in order for them to be successful. I mean, I don't know the people who are in Glen Farn. I don't know whether they've got geniuses working for them or not. But I look at what's happening with SpaceX, and I would say, Elon Musk, he's never built a rocket company before. Yeah, he's not going to be successful. Plenty of people said that. Oh, Elon Musk, he's never built an electric car before. Yeah, he's not going to be successful. Glenfarne's not developed a gas line, and so they're not going to be successful. They don't know how to manage a gas line. That's such bad thinking. Who cares? Who cares? Again, if we have to go through Glenfarne to get to the next private company that gets to the next private company, and we go through 3 private companies in the next 3 years, let's just make this argument, okay? We go through 3 companies in the next 3 years who all come in and try to do this. They each individually will have spent less time trying and failing than the state legislature has tried. And somehow we give the legislature and Senator Stedman the benefit of the doubt. This group of people has failed. This institution has failed over the last decade. This company, Glenfarne, and their partners have come in and they're less than 2 years into it. And we're ready to write them off because the legislature has questions and the legislature thinks they know best. What track record does the legislature have? They've not built any gas lines, large or small. They've got no track record of success for passing budgets on time. Why in the world does anything that's being said at this table outweigh what's being said from the private developer? Really bad logic. If there's anybody sitting at this table that lacks credibility, it's the legislators. It's the people who've been there for decades. Senator Stedman's never built a gas line. Who is he to lecture?
First question, do you have at AGDC the statutory definition to act in the best interest of Alaskans with your project development?
Through the chair, Representative Ruffridge, yes, we do. That was in our enabling statutes, and I believe it's in the Alaska Statute 3125.05.
Thank you. And a follow-up, if I may, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Why would a confidential document be in the best interests of Alaskans?
Through the chairs, Representative Ruffridge, when the legislature created us with House Bill 9 in 2013 and added to it in Senate Bill 138 in 2014, it was at the time that we were looking to advance projects to be able to deliver energy for Alaskans and to commercialize the North Slope natural gas resources. That was our mission. As such, the legislature saw that we were going to be acting in a commercial realm where we needed to be able to exchange information, share information with potential partners, and that would be commercially sensitive. So they gave us specific confidentiality provisions in those Alaska statutes, Alaska Statute 3125, to hold information confidential. So the legislature at the time gave us these powers to act as a commercial entity for the benefit of the state and to be able to work as such in that arena by holding information confidential.
Thank you.
Yes, Speaker
Edgman. The only people asking intelligent questions here are the 2 minority members on this conference committee supposed to be taking up a tax bill. Ken, you have no idea what you're talking about with regard to me. No idea. I'd be perfectly happy with the state not taking a dime of revenue off of this project if it means that if that lowers the cost of gas to Alaskans. I don't care whether the state of Alaska makes money off of this project or not. I don't care. Matter of fact, I would prefer it. If they didn't have a tax and that resulted in lower cost gas to me, my business, and all of my neighbors, it reduced the cost of electricity for Alaskans on the rail belt. Yeah, I think that's 100% the maximum benefit of the resource, not the revenue that the state can get. I care less. But read the room, brother. 21 and 11 and a governor. You're going to have some sort of tax because there are people here that you need to vote for who think they need tax revenue. So what is the least damaging, the least impactful tax that will get 21 and 11 votes? What is the least damaging and least hurting to the project? What enables the project to go forward? These are the questions that should be being asked. That should be the center concern of a conversation in a conference committee with regard to oil and gas property tax. Instead, we're talking about some leaked document that had something to do with Glenfarne's going to get paid if the state scares them away. Why aren't we talking about that? Like, who leaked that document? Why? Why was that document leaked? What strategic significance does it have to be talking about Glenfarne having to be paid if the state forces him out? Ken, you haven't been paying attention, brother. You have not been paying attention. You do not know what you're talking about.
Yeah, so I don't think we need to belabor this point. We have a lot of work in front of us, but as an onlooker, I've not been sitting on a committee that's been hearing this issue. It's been a little troubling to me to hear whether it's legislators or others, sort of make this a binary issue. You're either for the gas line or you're against it. You're either for AGDC or you're against AGDC. I don't see it that way. I think there's a tremendous amount of intricacy. There's nuances at every turn on this issue. There's complexity from the policy perspective, all of that and above. And I really appreciate the forthcoming sort of responses we've had here already at the start of this meeting. And we look forward to that continuing. But just for anybody listening, knowing that this issue is, as you described it, it is what at the moment the largest energy infrastructure project on the globe, on the planet. And in terms of protecting the state's interest while also giving the developer and certainly AGDC the tools it needs to get through this project. It's at times a very delicate balance. So I just want to be very clear that this notion that you're for or against something just outright, is not necessarily the case.
Wow, that's an interesting comment. I didn't know that we were having a conversation in this committee about being for or against AGDC. Like, honestly, I think this is a I don't know. I mean, it's an insight into conversations that are happening outside of this committee. Obviously, Speaker Edgman is speaking about a recognition that some people have it out for AGDC. Some people don't want AGDC to be successful. Some people don't like AGDC. And he's drawing a connection that this isn't yes or no about AGDC. How does that have anything to do with the tax policy? This is Speaker Edgman identifying that the problem here is not the tax. The problem is the individuals sitting in the seats who don't want AGDC to be successful. They've been threatening to fire Frank Richards for years. They've been looking for ways to shut down AGDC. I don't know if I'm ready to issue a prediction yet, but the more I hear the more little comments that I'm hearing from people and sensing what's actually going on behind the scenes here, because I'm no longer privy to behind the scene conversations. The more I think that this project is not going to go forward because of the legislature. If it's going to go forward, it's going to have a different jurisdiction in charge, because these people do not want it. That's the sad reality. And really, that's a slap in the face to Alaskans. Not only they don't want it, they don't want to even give them the opportunity to be successful. They don't even want to take that chance. What happens if they're successful? We all look like we got eggs on our face because we've been bashing these people for months now. Who's the fool?
Thank you, Speaker Edgman. I would have to say that I align myself with those comments strongly, but appreciate them. With that, not seeing any additional questions from committee members at this time. Mr. Kissinger, please proceed.
All right, this is Matt Kissinger for the record. Chair Schrage, these are the sections of House Bill 381 as it came out of Senate Finance Committee.
Okay, we're not going to go into that. We've already heard sectional analysis after sectional analysis ad nauseum. I think we've gotten the gist of the meeting. So conference committee is going to continue its process. We already talked about the fact that the conference committee cannot amend the bills before them. They cannot amend the bill before them. They get to choose which provisions they agree with, the Senate version or the House version. The only way they get to amend is if a 2/3 majority in the House and the Senate allow this committee to waive the rules and basically become a free conference committee, which would be allowing these people sitting at this table to continue where otherwise they would have to step aside and let somebody else. A conference committee, per the rules, a conference committee that cannot find agreement is replaced by a free conference committee, and the members sitting in the conference committee cannot be the same members in the free conference committee. So if the legislature is going to waive the rules, they're going to allow these people who do not want the pipeline to go forward to continue finding some solution. I would be discouraged if I were in Glenn Farn's position right here. Can you believe that a legislature in any of the 50 states outside of Alaska, who is a resource state, our legislature of all the legislatures is the one that's standing in the way of even the possibility of them being successful building a pipeline? I'm going to go back to a previous statement that I said. This election that's coming up, the cost of energy is going to be a major issue with voters. And if you get blamed for scuttling a pipeline project, don't be surprised if voters aren't happy with that. The voters are not going to care that you don't get revenue to the state government. They're going to care that their electric bill continues to climb and you did nothing about it. Your gas bill continues to go up and you did nothing about it. All right, folks, 2 hours. We've reached the culmination here of the information that needed to be presented. We're going to keep responding. We're going to keep watching what happens with the conference committee. I'm not sure whether they're meeting on Saturday. If there's information to bring to you, we will bring it tomorrow. Otherwise, it is likely that we will see you Monday. I appreciate all of the participation. This has been an outstanding conversation. Lots of lots of support and opposition for the pipeline. You clearly tell who is opposing the pipeline in the legislature and in this chat conversations that are happening. I hope cooler heads prevail. Have a good night, everyone, and we will see you either Saturday or we will see you Monday. Adios.